My name is Tyler Doggett. I'm a philosophy professor at the University of Vermont, and I live here in Vermont, which is where I met one of the moderators. And I have a son who's active on Discord, and so I've heard a lot about Discord, and here I am.
All right, fantastic. So, a brief first question. People will throw around the word sentience a lot, and basically claim, this is why we value some things, this is why we disvalue other things. Do you have any thoughts about how we can end up determining sentience, how we can know a computer is not, or a flower is not, but an animal is? Do you have any thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, so the way I think of sentience, it's not simply the process of being conscious, but it's the property of being conscious and able to feel pleasure and pain broadly construed. And as to how we can determine which things are sentient, I mean, that's just a question for scientists. And my impression is that more things are sentient than people realize, although also fewer things are sentient than some people want to be sentient. So, for example, my impression is that there's somewhat decent evidence that some bees, maybe all bees, even mosquitoes, are sentient, and the sentience non-sentience distinction does not track the animal not animal distinction. Some animals, I think we have the best thinking so far is that bivalves actually aren't sentient, and so there's some animals like bivalves that aren't sentient, and there are also living things that I think aren't sentient. So, for example, the dandelions that grow in my yard, I think are not sentient, although just this morning I was emailing with this guy in Australia who is pretty adamant that plants are sentient. And for me, that's just an open empirical question that philosophers don't have any special expertise on.
Gotcha. All right. So a follow-up question was something someone said in chat, or in the questions a little bit ago. It's, do you think, I believe Peter Singer said that while it doesn't appear bivalves are sentient, we should err on the side of caution and not consume them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think one thing, my impression is people have, philosophers in particular actually, have been quick to assume that things aren't sentient when they in fact are. So Descartes, for example, is pretty notorious for thinking no non-human animals were sentient. So even cats and chimpanzees, things that seem to us to very obviously be sentient, Descartes thought weren't sentient. And so it wouldn't be a huge surprise if A, I was wrong about whether bivalves are sentient, and B, if I were wrong, the way I'm wrong is the way that philosophers are typically wrong, which is underestimating how sentient the world is. So that speaks to one of your points. The other point is, I think there is some sort of principle of caution that is pretty plausible, which is if you think something might be sentient and you have no particularly good reason to kill it, you shouldn't kill it.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks so much. So the next question, something that a lot of vegans have been talking about recently, or animal rights activists in general.
I think most people who are here today at least wonder about whether the sufferings of, say, chickens matters. And I think, for me, that's not a hard question. I think, yes, of course it matters, and we shouldn't make chickens suffer or kill them without some very compelling reason, and because I'm hungry is not one. But the number of chickens in the world is just dwarfed by the number of wild animals in the world, and wild animals suffer at the hands of human beings in just enormous numbers, both from like direct attack, as when people are hunting them, or accidental attacks, like when I run over a squirrel because I'm driving to work, but also from things like habitat encroachment and climate change. So I think those issues are really urgent, considering how many animals stand to suffer. There's also this really hard issue that I think people who oppose animal killing and animal death also need to face, which is a lot of animal suffering is inflicted by other animals, and I don't think those other animals are doing anything wrong. And so, for example, I think if a lion kills a gazelle, the lion isn't doing anything wrong, but that's because the lion doesn't do anything right or wrong. I think of lions as being amoral creatures. That doesn't mean that as moral agents ourselves, we have no duties with regard to lion on gazelle violence. Here's an analogy which you and I think maybe have talked about. If two babies are scratching at each other, I don't think either one of them is doing anything wrong, and that's because I think of babies as basically amoral creatures. But that doesn't mean that you as a bystander are permitted to just let that happen. In fact, you might think there are pretty strong reasons for you to intervene and stop the babies from scratching each other. And so I think some philosophers think there's powerful reason for people to intervene in wild animal violence. There's a famous New York Times op-ed about this by the great philosopher named Jeff McMahon. It's called The Meat Eaters. It got a lot of pushback since, it does advocate for, I think, the gradual extermination of carnivores, which does not sound like something human beings could manage very well. But it's an idea that I think is worth thinking about.
All right, fantastic. I'm glad to hear you say that. I think a lot of people disregard wild animal suffering a little too hastily.
Yeah, I do think, as your question acknowledged this, I do think this is becoming more and more of an object of public concern. Like, you can read about wild animal suffering in major national outlets. Vox the website Vox very regularly now runs articles about this. The New York Times did an article about making road crossings safer for animals here in Vermont. There's an article recently about how to make highway crossings safer for snakes, which I thought was cheering, both because road crossings are an important issue, but also the fact that people were worried about snakes struck me as like quite surprising, since snakes are particularly charismatic animals.
Gotcha. All right, fantastic. So, a little more, a lot more. The deeper on philosophy side, do you have any thoughts on intuitionist epistemology? And can certain moral beliefs really be non-inferentially justified or self-evident?
That's a very sophisticated and advanced question. Moderator, how do you pronounce your? I know your real name, but I assume
yeah. You can call me Pake here.
Pake, okay. So it's Pake. It's a very sophisticated question. Yeah, I think so. I think probably some moral beliefs probably can be non-inferentially justified. I also think some moral beliefs are so basic that it would be hard to justify them in using premises that are more plausible to begin with than the belief itself. Like, I think my belief that the suffering of sentient creatures is bad is not something I could justify in terms of premises that are even more plausible than the premise that the conclusion, rather, that suffering is bad. If someone in all seriousness was like, I don't understand, why is suffering bad, I could come up with an argument, but I think the premises that I would use for that argument would just end up being less plausible and the conclusion that suffering is bad. And sometimes people do. I mean, sometimes in good faith, sometimes in bad faith, wonder whether suffering is bad.
All right, so sorry if this is too much to ask, but how would you construct an argument for someone who seems sort of bankrupt in that regard and doesn't understand why pleasure good, suffering bad, something super basic?
Yeah, so Packy, if you're like, let's say your uncle is being really difficult about this, which is something that happens. It's often uncles, and I think one thing to do is to try to get them to think about cases in their own life where things have gone very badly for them because of suffering, and then try to get them to see that if it went like that for another human being, that would also be bad, and then maybe move to like very charismatic megafauna like chimps or dolphins, and then just keep on like moving along the animal line until you get down to chickens.
All right.
I mean, Bucky, if your uncle is going to seriously deny that it's bad for him to have his nose chopped off without anesthetic, I mean, there's no arguing with the guy, and I would recommend just not doing it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. All right. So the next question is regarding sentience hierarchies. Are you familiar with the concept?
No, but the term's evocative, so I have a guess.
Yeah. Basically, some things, a bee is less morally valuable than a cow because less sentient or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sympathetic. I'm not sympathetic. Yeah, I'm not sympathetic to that. But I think, on the one hand, I think people have contributed lots of things to the world that my beloved rabbit, Kenya, and Kenya's fellow creatures have not contributed. I don't think anything follows about whether I or any other person am more valuable, period, than Kenya, and I think I would be uncomfortable thinking that it was like some sort of speciesism working in me if I made that move. I also think people often, I had this terrible interaction with one of my close friends who's a philosophy professor at UVM, Terence Cuneo, when a student jokingly asked me and Terence when we were teaching a course what I would do in a situation in which my beloved cat Midnight was on one spur of a trolley track and Terence himself was on another spur of the trolley track, and there was nothing I could do for both of them.
Oh my goodness.
And so Terence got mad because I took too long. I didn't even say, oh, I would save Midnight. I just said I took too long, and I said, oh, I guess I would save Terence. But I think my considered view about this is something like, it's fine to save cats rather than people. And when you deny that, you're like working towards a position where it's going to be fine to save some people rather than others based on stuff like their SAT scores or their ability to emotionally engage with fellow creatures. And since I reject that, I end up committed to the view that, yeah, I think it's fine to save cats rather than people.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
Don't tell Terence.
Yeah. You're not gonna like that one.
No.
All right. Oh, and anyone who has asked a question in the Tyler AMA channel, you can message me if you would like to ask your question on voice, and then you will be invited up. So if anyone wants to do that, but all right. So another question. I guess we got a broad one. So what do you think about anti-natalism?
I have children myself and did not start thinking about anti-natalism until after I had them, which I guess I'm grateful for. I think there are some very powerful. I think there's some very powerful arguments in favor of anti-natalism. For people who are curious about it, I don't recommend the David Benatar book, Better Never to Have Been. I do recommend the New Yorker profile of him that I thought was pretty great. He also has a more accessible book, the name of which is escaping me right now. It's about anti-natalism, also the meaning of life, I think. It came out after Better Never to Have Been. That one's an easier read. The main argument in the first half of Better Never to Have Been is really complicated, and yeah, I think it's not, unless you're like super geeky about philosophy, it's probably not worth it for you. If you are super geeky about philosophy, then I recommend that book to you, and some of the literature. Elizabeth Harman's review of the David Benatar book, I think, is really superb. I would recommend that if you want a pro-natalist, or not even pro-natalist, just an anti-natalist response to Benatar.
All right. Sounds great. And then someone asked further, what about extending it to elfism, which anti-natalism, but applies to all sentient life, not only humans.
It's called elfism?
Yeah. Wait.
I thought it was ephilism.
Apholism.
Elfism.
Elfism.
My dyslexia is killing me.
Ephilism. Oh God, this AMA got so dark so quickly. We're only like
Exterminate all elves.
right. I'm not opposed to the idea that we should wipe out sentient life. I'm not in favor of it either, but I think it's an open question. Yeah, and it is something that disturbs me quite a bit.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I guess that kind of answers. Someone else asked, will you press the red button that wipes out all of life on not only Earth, but everywhere else?
I think dandelions are okay. I think redwoods are great.
All right.
I mean, potato bugs might be totally fine.
Okay.
I think some living creatures are more problematic than others.
Gotcha. So let's take the most part, or not the most, but up there, humans, pretty problematic beings.
Yes.
Do you think that anti-natalism could hurt the animal rights or vegan movement? Because if vegans have less kids, then it's going to be hard to pass major legislation.
So first of all, I have no thoughts about no considered thoughts about this. I will offer you some unconsidered thoughts in a second. The first of which is, I was really interested to find that Peter Singer is not an anti-natalist, partly for reasons that are implicit in the question, which are lots of people are going to have children, and Singer's view is it's important that people have children whose children are going to be like forces for good. I mean, Singer as a utilitarian also has pretty powerful reasons for thinking we should keep having children on the grounds of utility. But he thinks there's a pretty powerful political reason for people with, say, like the views that Singer endorses about animals to keep having kids. And that's because if we don't have kids, then there won't be, or don't have enough kids, there won't be enough voices in favor of those positions. I can't remember where I read Singer saying that. I think it was in some interview I read pretty recently. I guess, and then my third thought about it is, yeah, I do think there might be a real cost to people with views I share not having children and not talking about those views with their children and with their friends and their colleagues. Whether we're morally required to do all that, or even morally permitted in some cases, I think is a hard further question. There's a way in which you're treating your child like a tool if you have your child in order to further the cause of veganism, or to further the cause of, let's say, just treatment of workers. And I'm a little uncomfortable with that. And I think the related thing to think about is whether we have duties to evangelize about our beliefs, even in cases like when it comes to animals, where I think I'm totally right. Like, I just think it's not a hard ethical question whether it's okay to kill a chicken for food in most cases. I think as far as ethics goes, that's actually pretty easy. And it doesn't follow from that I'm morally required to spread the word about that. I don't think. But maybe that's something I worry about too. I think that maybe I'm wrong about that. That's my 3-part answer for that.
All right. I mean, that was a great answer. So, this is another question. Are Beyond and Impossible, the brands, vegan? Yeah. And I guess we can extend that to ethical, not just, vegan enough. Because I don't particularly up the label. Maybe you do, but
Wait, what is it? Wait, what's the consideration in favor of them not being vegan?
So Beyond, specifically, they will feed basically employees or people products, and then also meat to like taste test it. And Impossible tested on 180 rats because they wanted to do something weird with heme iron.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. Okay, I did not know.
So basically, one tested on rats, one of them did and potentially might do in the future with their new products, use real meat to test products. So do you have any thoughts on that? It's a bit spicy.
I'm distressed to hear that. I did not know that.
I also, learned about that recently. Yeah. That's the best.
In general, I think there's a very powerful case against animal testing, so I'm not thrilled to hear about that. I think even if the food were impeccably produced, to get to your second question, of course, I mean, if it were impeccably produced from like the point of view of animals, of course it might be unethical for various other reasons. To use the tomato example I started talking about it in my intro, I mean, tomatoes are produced under appalling conditions, and those conditions might well be vegan, but also like straightforwardly immoral because of the way that workers who pick the tomatoes are treated. And so it would not surprise me if Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers and other products are produced in morally questionable ways, even if those morally questionable ways didn't involve the mistreatment of non-human animals. The mistreatment of human animals is a significant problem in the food industry. I think some people worry about processed foods. There are some ethical issues there. I don't have a well worked out view about that. I'd welcome people educating me about that.
Would you? I've never heard of any ethical issue with processed food. Could you give like an outline of like what might be the ethical consideration?
Yeah, I think some people think. So there are a couple. There actually is when we started the Why You Know Vegan session was talking about this, about how processed foods are typically more expensive, and so there might be an issue about like, injustice in producing them. Like Beyond Burgers are things that only relatively well-off people can afford. So that's an issue. Another issue is they might be more time and labor intensive and might bring with them more of an environmental footprint than non-processed foods. Those are two issues. There's a third issue, which I'm totally unmoved by, but that I think some people find really powerful, which is there's something unnatural about them. And I think for some people, it's not that natural is good, but it is that unnatural is bad. So that would be a third sort of issue.
So I guess briefly coming off that, you'll see. So people will take that sentiment a lot. Unnatural, bad, whatever. And a lot of times in the debate about animal ethics, you'll get the lions eat meat. Why can't we? Right. So, what do you think the best approach is to deal with that comment? Because I know there's a million things you could say. It's just it seems clearly like a not good argument. But what's just the most straightforward way that you like to just kind of deal with that?
Yeah, right. So that is something that comes up all the time in my intro-level food ethics class, and I think just as a is a matter of tactics, like trying to convince people, which is not always a good thing to do, because a lot of times people are not trying to be convinced; they're just trying to bother you.
Yeah,
or it's not a good faith argument. But sometimes people are genuinely open-minded, and I think there are two things to genuinely open-minded people. I think there are two things to say. One is to point out that lions and other cats, including house cats, my beloved cat Midnight, they do all kinds of stuff that it would very clearly be immoral for human beings to do. So, for example, Midnight regularly pees in places it would be straightforwardly immoral for human beings to pee. He regularly destroys stuff that it would be clearly immoral for human beings to destroy. And no one thinks, from the fact that Midnight peed and ripped up, peed on and ripped up my wife's sweater, it would be totally fine for me to do that. And so they're just things that cats do that are totally natural things for cats to do, that are nevertheless not okay for us to do. Now, sometimes people are like, well, cats are cats, people are people. Can you think of examples where people are doing stuff where it's totally natural, but it's not okay? And the answer to that is yes, of course. I mean, lots of stuff that people do that's wrong is natural. I mean, you can be silly about it too, like in the baby example I used earlier. I mean, babies very often do bad stuff, and toddlers do. Toddlers will wail away at each other. And I don't think that's immoral. I think toddlers typically are not moral agents at all. But it would be absurd if you got punched by a toddler, Pake, while you were babysitting them, and you punched them back. It would be absurd to say to the distraught parent, "Oh, they started it," or "They did it to me, so it was okay for me to do it to them." I mean, that no one thinks that, and so I think when people make that point about lions and gazelles, I'm impressed by it for the Midnight the cat reason, and also toddler on toddler violence reason.
I think the toddler, that's a funny example. All right, thanks so much for that. So this next question is, are you in favor of killing xenomorphs that are eating humans?
Oh wait, xenomorphs are the are the aliens from Alien?
Yes.
Yeah,
so
right.
Basically, this argument is brought up a lot. Some vegans will argue that we ought kill all predators. And the basically in the marginal cases, name the trait fashion, people are asked to name the trait between xenomorphs who hunt humans and lions that hunt gazelles, and if we would kill the xenomorphs or if we would kill the lions or whatever. Do you have any thoughts there?
Okay, first my son taught me what a xenomorph is the other day. I'd seen the movies, I just didn't know that they were called xenomorphs. Gotcha. Do the xenomorphs have to eat humans?
Yeah, we could just equalize it to the same as
we just
I'm not in the movies, but let's say they're in the same place as lions, where that's what they got to eat.
Yeah, okay, good. So the xenomorph is in a position where it has to eat me. Let's say it has to be me, or it's going to die. I think if it's trying to eat me in that situation, that's a pretty straightforward self-defense case where I think it's fine for me to vaporize the xenomorph. And I do think, I'm not unsympathetic to where this is going about lions. It's just I'm not unsympathetic in principle. I mean, I love charismatic megafauna very much, and do not support. I mean, I love all sorts of terrible creatures, and so I don't actually work towards the extinction of, say, my house cat or lions. But I do think, in theory, there is something pretty compelling about that line of thought. But in practice, of course, people would screw that up dramatically. The xenomorph case is easy because I'm just imagining the xenomorph is approaching me and I have a vaporizer. In that case, I don't think there's anything morally fraught about it. The lion case is much harder because there's an ecosystem involved. Yeah, I mean, if you want to develop the case so there's like an ecosystem where we're the gazelles and the xenomorphs are the lions, yeah, I mean, I don't know. If the gazelles had vaporizers, I guess it could be okay if the gazelles were vaporizing the lions. But that's a weird example.
Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, like an ecosystem, right, where we, live in the savannah and xenomorphs hunt us. And then say you are, in your current position, and then you, like, learn about in National Geographic that there's this group of humans that just gets hunted by xenomorphs, and that's their existence. And you could potentially do something to stop it.
Yeah.
Do you think you ought to?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's a case in which one group of moral agents is hunting a different group of moral agents and trying to kill them for a reason that's like quite compelling, but that doesn't require the prey to lay down their lives.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And so the lion gazelle case is different because neither the lion nor the gazelle is itself a moral agent, I don't think. I was just joking, and I was like, oh, if the gazelle said vaporizers, it would be different.
All right. Fantastic. Real quick, tofu or tempeh?
Tempeh.
Interesting. All right.
Wait, did I get that one wrong? What kind of score?
That was the only question that had a right or wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So we have one a little broad. It's basically, are you a moral subjectivist or objectivist? And can you elaborate upon your positions? I guess just take.
Yeah, sure. I'm a moral objectivist in the following sense. I think that there are moral rules that do not depend on the desires or the deals or the emotions of human beings. And I think these rules are binding across time and space. So, for example, I think eating babies for fun is wrong and always has been wrong and will be wrong. And that would be the case even if everyone were super psyched about eating babies and in fact made deals with each other about how they were going to eat babies.
Mm-hmm. All right. Gotcha. Fantastic. So, brief question. You, I believe, in class recommended a paper by Nagel regarding, like, I'm not sure if I want to say sentience, but the one about bats.
What is it like to be a bat?
Yes. Would you be able to go over that briefly and explain if you think it's, worth a read?
Very briefly, the answer to that is yes. It's definitely worth a read. Yeah, that's an easy one. And then the more detailed answer to that, I guess, is it's definitely worth a read, but it's also important to keep in mind that he was writing in the mid-70s, and so I think philosophy has made a lot of progress since then, and so there are good ideas there, but they've also been built out quite a bit in the 45 years or so since the paper came out. That said, Nagel's paper is accessible in a way that the papers that are building on it often are not accessible. So yeah, I would recommend that to everyone.
All right, fantastic. So here's a question. In the case of people switching to vegan lifestyles, sometimes people wonder what will happen to the animals who used to be exploited. In slow transition, the simple answer is the agriculture industry just won't breed replacements. However, in a faster transition, what is the most ethical answer to how to deal with animals we're destined for, or were already in captivity, but are now no longer needed, quote unquote, by the industry due to lower demand?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a tough one. I don't know the answer to that. I would welcome folks' thoughts about that one. Yeah, and that's, on the one hand, it's easy because I'm pessimistic enough to think there's not going to be a fast transition. And so this is not something we have to take that seriously. On the other hand, if, oh my gosh, there were a fast transition, what would happen? Oh my gosh, I don't know, Pocket. But that is something I think. But even with a slow transition, I mean, I think that's something. There's an issue there about how a transition towards a vegan lifestyle is going to affect animals. That I think is, yeah, I think that's it's hard.
All right. So is there if there's any ethical way of using animals, what would be the limit? Sorry. Okay, the question's worded strange. But it's like, is there any ethical way of using animals, and what would be the limit to this use, and how is it ethical?
So use is, I mean, there's a way of hearing use, so it's morally loaded. So the answer to that question has to be no. Like the way some philosophers, and I think this is a way that we use it in use in everyday life. There's a way we use it so it's morally loaded. So it's sort of built into it that there's something morally off about using someone. Like when people say you're just using me, that's already morally loaded. Is there a way of treating animals and getting something out of them that's not morally bad? Yes, I think, and I know that lots of people disagree, and in fact, maybe lots of people who are here, and I'm happy to talk about this. I think having companion animals can be a form of use. Like you might be getting something out of your animal and have added your animal to your family for companionship. And I think that needn't be morally objectionable. Here's another controversial example. I myself do not eat roadkill and actually do not think it's okay to eat roadkill. I think there is actually a kind of powerful argument that some vegan arguments can get behind, that sort of use of dead animal body is okay. Again, like I myself don't endorse that, but I think for people who are really interested in harm minimization, using the dead bodies of animals for sustenance or for clothing, in cases where you aren't killing them yourself, there is something where like your pet just dies, and so you eat them. There is a kind of vegan argument in favor of that I think some vegans can get behind, and so that would be another type of use that I think some vegans would think is totally fine. Although, I mean, I myself actually do not think it's okay to eat your pets.
Gotcha. So, basically, your argument, or your view regarding roadkill, would you be able to go into that briefly as to why you are against using the already dead animal bodies?
Yeah, so I do. Again, I think there's like a powerful argument that lots of vegans make in favor of not killing animals and eating animals, which is something like when you eat animals, you send a signal to companies to go ahead and kill more animals. And so eating animals is in a way, killing at a distance. That sort of argument is quite plausible when it comes to certain sorts of financial transactions. Like, if you go to certain lakes, you can have someone catch a fish for you and kill it and serve it to you. And some people think that when you go to McDonald's and you order McNuggets, a similar thing is happening. If that is your only reason against eating animals, then there's very little to be said, probably nothing to be said, against eating roadkill in cases in which you're eating the roadkill is not going to send a signal to anybody. So let's say, Pake, that you only eat roadkill in private, or you only ever communicate that you eat roadkill to people who understand that killing animals for food is not okay. So for that kind of vegan, there's nothing objectionable about eating the roadkill. And moreover, if you eat the roadkill, you're avoiding eating plants that might themselves have been killed in a way that also killed sentient creatures. And so I think there's a guy who works on this. Gosh, his name is Donald. I'll come back to his name. Will come back to me. He's a philosopher at Penn State who works on this. Has written some, I think, like pretty powerful and interesting arguments about it. For me, these arguments end up not being compelling because I think they're also pro-animal considerations that have nothing to do with sending signals to people to kill animals. Oh, the guy's name is Donald Bruckner, by the way. Donald Bruckner. But I think there are also powerful considerations of symbolism and just like giving the finger to animals that come when you're eating McNuggets. Like, if you have a choice between eating McNuggets, like leftover McNuggets that are about to go in the trash, or just like leftover broccoli or the compost bin, or leftover broccoli that's going to the compost bin, it seems to me like by eating the McNuggets, even if you aren't sending signals to anybody, you aren't doing anything to make yourself more likely to eat animals in the future, buy animals in the future, there's a way in which you're just like giving the finger to those chickens, which I think you shouldn't do. That said, I know that other people think you're somehow giving the finger to the chicken if you don't eat the chicken, like there's something disrespectful about letting the chicken's body go to waste. I will just note in response to that that is not the way we treat human bodies. When there's a dead human body, no one thinks, well, very few people think, oh, we should make a skin suit out of it. See, like I'm watching the part of Walking Dead that involves people who wear skin suits, and no one's like, oh yeah, those people are quite respectful to the zombies. They're using the skin, not letting it go to waste. And so I've never really been moved by the idea that there's something respectful about eating dead animal bodies. I think for me, it's like a sign of disrespect. Although, I mean, what's disrespectful is going to be contingent, and that actually will vary from place to place. In some cultures, I think it is probably quite respectful to eat dead bodies. It's just in the like upper middle class culture I'm embedded in Vermont, I think it's not.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what there was some island where basically they would eat people, and then some disease basically happened.
Yeah. No, I think there are ways, and I do think the symbolic meaning of what we do varies from culture to culture. And this is actually this is consistent with being a moral objectivist. Okay, I promise. The moral meaning does vary from culture to culture, and so there absolutely could be cultures in which there is something respectful about eating dead human bodies. I do not happen to live in one of those.
All right. Sounds great. So we're gonna have a brief question or a couple questions about some normative ethics stuff from Fish. I'm getting him up here right now. Fish, you gotta accept the. Oh, there you are. All right, here we go.
Okay,
You're mad laggy.
can you hear me or no?
Oh, yep, there you are. You're good.
Oh shit. Oh, better. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good, Fish.
So, okay. So I'm first of all, thanks for doing this Q&A thing. I'm not sure if my question applies to your position or not. So I was told that you call yourself a moderate deontologist.
I'm loving how you found this out, Fish. But yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Sorry.
So do you distinguish that from like threshold deontology at all, or is there no meaningful distinction?
Oh my gosh, Fish, this is a super. First of all, thanks for coming. Second of all, yeah, this is a very sophisticated question.
Okay.
Yeah, there could be. You could have. I think you could have a form of modern deontology that wasn't a threshold
Oh, shit, I'm sorry, I
deontology.
cut out for a second there. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Just thinking about it, I think you could probably have a form of modern deontology that's not a form of threshold deontology. Although I'm not really thinking about how it would go right now. Yeah, the threshold stuff. I do recommend this paper by John Tarek that I mentioned at the very beginning of the chat to you, which is a super hardcore paper that argues that numbers just don't matter. Like if you have a choice between saving one or a billion, it's permissible to save the one. Yeah, thresholds have always seemed a little bit weird to me, but yes, I'm also a moderate deontologist, Fish, so I'll have to think some more about that one.
Okay, cool. I guess that's all I wanted to ask then.
That was a very. I mean, I'm also Fish. I'm also like you can email me. I'm happy to talk more about this offline too. That's a very sophisticated question. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask was just there's an objection to threshold deontology that I've heard that I have heard answers. I was just kind of curious to hear what other threshold deontologists, what their response would be. So that's why I was wondering whether or not you made the distinction between your position and threshold deontology.
Why don't you, if you just send me an email about it, I'm happy to get into this with you.
Sure. Okay, cool. What's your email address? Will I write that down? Oh shit! Did I cut out again? Oh no! What's going on?
It's just if you just tyler.doggett@uvm.edu.
Tyler.Doggett. Okay, cool. Sorry, at what?
At uvm.edu. The University of Vermont's acronym or initialism is UVM.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Pocket, you can kick me off whenever you want.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Fish. All right. So, thank you for that answer. And what is your view on vegan diets for companion animals?
Oh gosh, this sounds so fraught. So yeah, I myself have 3 companion animals, 2 cats, 1 rabbit. Rabbit is a very happy vegan, obviously. Cats are vicious, no good, murdering omnivores. I mean, like, outdoor cat, indoor cat doesn't matter. Like, they catch mice inside our house and eat them. They catch mice outside of our house and eat them, and they eat meat. I think one important issue to think about, and this has not been getting as much press as I would like, is how cat food is produced. So if cat food is just byproduct of human consumption, or meat for human consumption, then its moral status is going to be different than if you're killing animals for cats. In cases in which you're killing animals for cats, then I think this brings up the lion and gazelle issues that we've been talking about. But if what's going on with pet food, and my impression actually is that this is what's going on with a lot of pet food, that we just feed animals scraps from our consumption, then the moral issue that's raised is an issue about whether it's okay for like Midnight the cat, my cat, to benefit from wrongdoing, or for me to let Midnight benefit from wrongdoing, because of course Midnight himself doesn't do anything right or wrong by engaging in wrongdoing, because Midnight, I think, is amoral, but I might do something wrong or right by letting Midnight benefit from wrongdoing. And on the one hand, I think there is a pretty powerful intuition that it's wrong to benefit from wrongdoing. On the other hand, spelling that out precisely is quite difficult. There are very clearly ways in which it is permissible to benefit from wrongdoing. So, for example, Pake, if you were a detective who really enjoys solving murders, that's a way in which you're benefiting from wrongdoing, but that's fine. If I do something terrible to you and you make a lot of money off of it, you might be benefiting from wrongdoing, and that might be fine too. All of us presumably owe our very existence to awful historical wrongs over the millennia. And you might think not all of our existence is wrong. So the current situation, I think, with cat food is that much of what our cats eat from stores is just a byproduct of what people are consuming anyway, in which case there's a benefiting from wrongdoing issue there, which I think is tricky, but it's not obviously wrong to benefit from wrongdoing, even though, of course, there's some cases where it's very clearly wrong to benefit from wrongdoing. So, for example, if I steal a television, Pake, and give it to you, you shouldn't take it. And part of the explanation of that is you shouldn't benefit from wrongdoing. But then there are other cases, like I was saying, where benefiting from wrongdoing seems fine. And so I think there's important ethical work to be done here on what sorts of benefiting from wrongdoing are okay and what sorts aren't. And then there's this further empirical question, which is, like, how is cat food actually produced? I actually don't know the answer. But like I said, my impression, and I have this from a pretty reliable source, was it actually is produced in a way, it's way less sketchy than you think it is. It's not like we're going out there and killing a bunch of animals for Midnight the cat. Instead, what we're doing is killing a bunch of animals for all the omnivorous people out there, and then we give the cats the scrap. But actually, I would love it if someone spoke up about that.
That makes sense. I've never heard of a farm that's like, oh, what do we do? Oh, we make dog food.
We make dog food.
Yeah, cows for dog food or whatever. All right, and I think Dantes has a question right now. He just popped up here.
Yeah. Can you hear me fluid?
Sound good, Dantes?
Cool. Yeah, I was wondering, it's really unrelated to the last couple questions, but what your moral evaluation is of, and also what you think about the arguments in regards to specifically like slaughterhouse vigils activism. And so basically there are types of activism where people go to slaughterhouse and sort of, I forgot the correct word usage, but there seem to be arguments in favor and arguments against. I'm not sure if you were, and I was just wondering what your evaluation is of those, if you have any opinions on it.
Could you tell me more about what a slaughterhouse vigil is? What's happening at the slaughterhouse?
Well, basically, a group of activists will go to a slaughterhouse where, they're for trucks with animals they're about to get slaughtered. They come in there, and they will sort of like stop. Oh, can anyone hear me? Hello?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like a group of individuals, activists, will go to slaughterhouse where they will sort of try and stop the trucks. They're coming into the slaughterhouse where they will, where their trucks of animals are about to be slaughtered, and they're sort of like gonna, film them, give them water, or sort of like pay respect. I don't know how to explain, but yeah, they will sort of like stop the trucks or get close to the
Yeah.
truck, and
I think that's great. I'd never heard of that. I think it's, for me, it's hard to see what someone could say against helping an animal that's in obvious distress.
Mhm.
I think there are powerful political considerations against certain forms of direct action against slaughterhouses. I think if people were to start bombing slaughterhouses, that might be catastrophic for the animal movement because of the backlash it would engender. But action like that, where you're just tending to animals, even just like the action that Direct Action Everywhere undertakes of just like rescuing some animals, strikes me as hard to object to morally. There's this further issue, Dantes, which I really struggle to understand in my own mind, and I welcome hearing other folks' thoughts about. There are cases in which there'll be terrible political backlash to doing something, but you should do it anyway. And I understand why people, when it comes to the human treatment of animals, think we're in one of those cases. I mean, just like I understand why people think something similar is true about climate.
I think that the argument, I think it's made by Franz Gression. I don't know if I'm butchering his name, but I think the argument is like about, in terms of efficacy, that it wouldn't be effective, and secondly, that you're prolonging their suffering because you're keeping them longer there in these conditions. So
I see. So it's a situation where, like, you stop the truck and give the animal some water, and then the animal goes and gets slaughtered anyway.
Yeah, so so the animals are going to get slaughtered anyway. It's mostly to sort of like, it's sort of mostly to sort of like give them comfort or water.
Oh, okay, good. That's helpful. Yeah, great. Okay, good. So I do think, the Francione position sounds. I see the Francione position about that. Then, so it does seem like that might not be very efficacious in getting people to knock it off with slaughterhouses, and it has the short-term good of relieving an animal's thirst, but the long-term bad of keeping them in this very stressful position for longer, and it's not going to change the ultimate outcome for them anyway. Okay, if you put it like that, then yeah, that seems pretty powerful.
Yeah, there seems to be many arguments in favor and against. So there's also the argument of motivating the activists, that like sort of seeing the animals, seeing what conditions they are in, and it sort of like motivates them to do more activism and do more outreach. So it's well, obviously it's going to be incredibly hard to really calculate the utility of such acts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should probably try some experiments. I think people are probably pretty bad at knowing what the political ramifications of various actions are going to be, and there's probably pretty severe psychological pressure in favor of being conservative about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the same maybe a few thoughts on this. Like the same thing would be with their videos where people will sort of like fur shame, for example. So they will be screaming at someone and sort of like shaming them for having fur. And maybe particularly it's not effective to the person that's has the fur on. But if like that video goes viral, then it's sort of like it's hard to really know what the impact sometimes is.
Yeah, I mean, right, and I do think, I agree. It's hard to know what the impact is going to be. And it's easy to just from your chair as you're watching the video just start making stuff up about what you think the impact's going to be. But yeah, I wonder if anyone's done any work about these campaigns that happened when I was a kid in the 80s and then in the 90s, of people throwing stuff, blood and paint and other liquids, at people in furs, and whether that materially affected for production and for consumption. I mean, I would hope there's work about this, but I don't know what it says.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dantas.
All right, so I'm gonna ask one real quick, and then we could have another person come up. So in terms of the trolley problem, what is the number of people on this other side of the trolley that would make you pull the lever, or rather, make it such that we should pull the lever?
So we're thinking about a case where the trolley's zooming down the track towards some number of people, and I could switch it to one person.
Yes.
And then your question is how many people would have to be on the initial track for me to kill the one?
Yes. Or yeah. Yes.
In fact, I'm super hardcore about this because of this guy John Tarek that I mentioned. I think the number is super high for me, just because I think in general we shouldn't be going around killing people, and I think there's a pretty powerful case that the numbers don't count in the following sense: that if you have a choice between smaller groups or larger groups where there's no overlap, that you should save one group, but it's fine to save the smaller group. Again, like, people are listening to this and thinking it's totally bonkers. I do recommend this article by John Taurek, Taurek, called "Should the Numbers Count?" This does also connect with Fish's thresholds question. I think for some people, there must be some number that's bigger than it's bigger than 5 or 10, but it's smaller than a million. Yeah, you can talk me into that some days too. It depends on my mood, I guess.
All right. Fantastic. Yeah, much appreciated for that answer. So, I think we're gonna have. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly read. Like, there were a couple comments here related to the other one. Could I just quickly mention them?
Yeah, great.
Okay, yeah. So there were a couple comments here, real quick, which was sorry, one moment. So someone said, yeah, that the vigils they're filmed, so they're also posted on social media, so where people can see what happens to these animals. Yeah. And also that the vigils are only they only stop for 2 minutes.
Oh yeah. Okay, good.
And
good.
Just clarify. Sorry, thank you.
Okay,
and I'm not sure if you still want to comment on anything. So.
No, that's super helpful. I think my thanks to the people who commented there. In that case, then I can see why they might be either efficacious or just not counter-efficacious with regard to public opinion and the short-term benefit to the animal of just being tended to. Is not going to come along with this cost of dramatically lengthening the misery they're feeling while they're being transported, which is one of the very worst parts of being raised for slaughter to a slaughterhouse. So that's really helpful. Yeah, but again, I do think it's an empirical question which I don't know the answer to, and I shouldn't speculate about what the effects of this are. I myself have I think naively, and even now still naively, hope that, if people just knew what was going on with animals, they would change their minds about whether it's okay to raise and kill animals for food. And I do think that's probably naive on my part, and it's just really hard for me, I think, to face the truth that people know, and a lot of people just don't care. And so showing them more videos doesn't get them to know anything they don't know already, although it might actually make them feel worse about themselves somehow, which might have counterproductive results. I don't know. These questions about the efficacy of various tactics, I think, are great. Such important questions for the animal movement, and it's probably irresponsible for me to speculate on, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that simply telling people the truth about animals is very clearly not sufficient.
All right. Much appreciated. So, real quick, going back to the Tariq. Do you think that your views regarding the Saving the Few paper have any practical relevance to vegans?
I think so, Raquel, but I haven't really done it. Yeah, okay, good. So, yes. Here's a way in which I think there's clear connection between the Tarek stuff and my interest in animals. I think some people think the most important group of animals to help are fish. And that's because there are so many fish. And then the second most important group of animals to help are chickens. And that is because there are so many chickens. And then after that, you get pigs and the cows and the geese. And I think if the reasoning is just in terms of the numbers like that, that is not compelling. If you have a choice between saving an enormous population of chickens from being brutally hurt and killed, or a choice between saving a smaller number, a totally different but smaller number of chickens from being brutally hurt and killed, my own view is that actually it's probably okay to save the smaller group of chickens, and this also carries over to other species too. So if you had a smaller population of, let's say, geese, that you could save instead of the larger group of chickens, the Tarek view leads to the conclusion that it's fine to save the smaller group of geese rather than the larger group of chickens. That's a way in which those two topics are connected. Again, I will note that the Tarek view is like wildly counterintuitive and implausible, and very few philosophers believe it, and I'm not trying to convince anyone of it. Not now.
All right, not yet. Great. So, Height, were you able to come up? Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, so first off, I just noticed your non-vegan role, and I wanted to ask, are you vegan, and why or why not?
I'm mostly vegan. I was distressed I had to check that box. I figured someone would want to ask about it. I don't eat any animals, and I eat very little in the way of animal products, but I'm not a purist, and I live with a group of people I love very dearly, all of whom eat animals and animal products. And again, well, I never eat meat. We do have some animal products in the house that I will sometimes eat. My view about veganism is a little bit complex. One is, I think, probably Americans, maybe other cultures, we spend too much time thinking about issues of personal individual consumption and not enough time on institutional production. And so for me, the really important thing is that we stop brutalizing and killing animals. And it's only a very, 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 very distant importance about whether people end up like eating carcasses of chickens that they find on the street. The other thing I want to say about veganism is, and this came up in an answer to an earlier question, I actually think the most powerful arguments in favor of not consuming various things are typically symbolic considerations. And I think the symbolism of consuming dead animals is really, really, really bad. And the symbolism of consuming, let's say, egg that's on a bagel is significantly less bad. That said, I also think the way that chickens are treated on egg-laying farms and cows are treated on dairy farms is an abomination, just like the way they're treated on farms where they're raised for meat is an abomination. And so all of those farms, I think, should be abolished.
All right, so then it sounds like you're not like contributing to the purchase of these products, but if they are around in your house, and they're convenient for you or something like that, then you might have.
It's not even that. Like, I would never, if my kids like didn't eat bacon, I would never be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to freegan that. I do think freeganism is an interesting, complicated thing. My own view, height, is that I would be giving the finger to the pig if I ate the bacon, and so not thinking it's okay to give pigs the finger. I don't. Also, I mean, we have lots of animal products lying around the house because, I mean, everyone in my family, except for me and the rabbit, eat animal products. And it's not like I'm like, oh, here's some butter, I'm going to like just put it on some bread. But I also, if my wife has made something that has like some cheese in it, or like there's like some egg in the cupcake, I won't turn it down just because it's vegan. Yeah, that's like the more detailed version of my eating habits, I guess. But I like don't eat animal products very often.
Okay. I also had a question, because you said symbolic considerations are the strongest arguments for veganism. Do you think that some of the benefit of the symbolic consideration would be that you can be a more effective advocate for systemic change or societal change at a larger level, to the degree to which you're consistent with that in your individual practice?
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I think, so as you probably know, people love accusing other people of hypocrisy. Yep. So when I'm teaching Peter Singer, when I'm not teaching the animal stuff, I often treat his masterpiece, Famine, Affluence, and Morality, which is an argument that all of us should be doing much, much, much more than we're probably currently doing. Maybe some of you are good, but most of us are terrible, including myself, to help the many creatures in the world who are really struggling right now. And students' response to that is typically to get defensive and want to know how much Singer does. And Singer, by his own lights, does a lot, but not as much as he should. And so I do think one thing you're getting at that's really important here is there are very powerful reasons for people who are working for towards the abolition of animal agriculture to not eat animals and not eat animal products, involving the symbolism of doing that, and connectedly, but maybe not identically, not opening themselves up to a hypocrisy objection, which people just love making. So yeah, I'm actually quite sympathetic. And actually, Singer himself is in favor of symbolism. It's just that Singer thinks the reason symbolism is important is because symbolism produces the best results. I think symbolism is actually intrinsically important, but Singer and I agree that symbolism is important.
Real quick, Tyler, regarding hypocrisy objections, I think we gotta touch on my favorite topic of crop deaths.
Oh my gosh, people, you need to know that Pocket was in a class with me this past semester, and the class had nothing to do with crop deaths. It had to do with 17th and 18th century Western European philosophy. And Jesus, if Pocket did not want to talk about crop deaths instead of Descartes after every class. Okay, here we go.
All right. So yeah, what is your response when people say vegans are hypocrites? They kill animals too. Grass-fed beef's great. One animal a year. Yada yada. You're killing 80,000 field mice.
I mean that objection is so rarely offered in good faith. Is the first thing I want to say about that. The second thing I want to say about it is, if you were strictly in the business of counting the number of animals who are killed indirectly or directly in producing food, then yeah, I guess you could talk yourself into a position according to which the best thing to do is to kill one blue whale every few years, and then you Pocky, are just eating your kale, and oh my gosh, it's drenched in the blood of voles. So many more animals are killed indirectly to kill to produce that kale, yeah, I just don't see why even people who think the numbers count would want to do it like that. And then notice that that case is incredibly unrealistic. It involved killing a blue whale, which is like a really pure free-range animal. Actual cases of free-range animals are pretty few and far between. And so, I don't know, if you're out the choices between, I don't know, hunting a deer and eating kale, I guess two things to say are, first, when you eat the kale, you aren't killing anything other than maybe you killed the kale. It is possible that there were indirect side effects of the production of the kale, but you might want to wonder about that in the venison procurement or the free-range beef procurement too. And then the other thing to say is there are lots of effects that are, some of which are purely symbolic and some of which are efficacious, about eating kale versus eating animals. And I think, as a matter of fact, the symbolic effect of eating kale is not to get people to think, oh my gosh, that guy hates voles, or oh my gosh, that guy hates mice. Whereas the symbolic effect of watching people eat burgers is, that guy doesn't care that much about cows, I guess.
All right. Thanks so much.
I'm sure that's the last time you're going to ask me about crop dust.
Oh, yeah, we're completely
all done.
Never again.
Yeah.
No, so hi, if you want to ask like one more of your question, I want to get Isaiah up right after, but I think your hedonistic question was a good one. If you want to ask that.
Oh yeah. So I was wondering if your conception of utility in your moral system was hedonic or not.
There are a lot of very philosophical questions here. If by hedonic you just mean like this, like a super narrow conception of pleasure and pain, no. My conception of well-being and happiness, I guess, is pretty broad, but yeah. But so if you meant the really narrow pleasure-pain thing, no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is something broader, which involves well-being, where this can go beyond sensations of pleasure and pain.
Do you have a definition of well-being?
Not that's helpful, but I would say something. I mean, I would say something like flourishing. But I think this is actually. I don't think if you were adamant, and some people are. I mean, this is I think a powerful position in utilitarian literature, that like there's no good way of explaining well-being other than in terms of pleasure and pain. And so I do think if you're like, I don't know what you mean by flourishing, then I think we're at the end of the road. I think what I would try to do at that point is to get you to think about examples where someone is suffering quite a bit, but there's a way in which you think they're like, if their life isn't going, or like here, maybe this is a better example. Like think about someone whose life is actually going pretty well. They feel a kind of contentment, but they don't feel those endorphin rushes that we feel sometimes, and like then compare them to someone who's like constantly taking pills that give them the endorphin rush. The way I'm thinking about well-being, it's an open question whether the first person, the contented person whose life is going well in all sorts of ways, has a higher level of well-being than the person who's constantly popping the pills. But I think if you think of pleasure in strictly hedonic terms, I think you have to rule that out and think that the pill popper has more well-being. Does that help?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just like explaining my view.
It sounds like when you said flourishing, I was thinking you might have been talking about like a eudaimonia-based account or something like that, but it doesn't quite sound like that.
Yeah, I'm not super into the Aristotelian stuff.
All right, cool. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Isaiah, you got a question? Get up here. There he is. All right.
How's it going?
Hey, what's that?
Okay, so I think you said earlier that, and I could be wrong about this, but I think you said it's wrong to kill sentient beings, and the thing that makes animals sentient was experiencing like suffer and pleasure. Is that correct?
Yeah, the way I'm thinking about sentience, it's like it's having consciousness which enables you to be capable of pleasure and pain, or maybe like more generally, and this connects to what Height was just asking me, like more generally, like having things like go like pretty well for you or badly for you in some more general sense. I don't think it's always wrong to kill beings like that. If you're trying to murder me, and the only way I can save my life is to vaporize you, I think that's fine. But I do think there's a strong prohibition against killing sentient creatures for no particular good reason.
Okay. I think you probably just answered my like main question in that case. But I guess you'd say then that you'd be okay with saying it's wrong to kill beings even who are just like phenomenally conscious, or other than like even if they can experience well-being.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So was that I love this question. I've been thinking about this yeah, imagine someone who had a really rich mental life, but somehow had like both their like pleasure and their pain receptors disengaged. But life, we want to think like the way I'm thinking about it, I guess like life could still be going like well or badly for them, and they might like quite fervently desire to keep going, and they have these projects that they're really invested in, and they're really psyched about, even though they can't get pleasure out of them. Yeah, I want it to turn out that it's okay. I mean that it's not okay to kill a person like that. You couldn't make it okay to murder me just by giving me pills that make me like permanently incapable of feeling pleasure and pain. You can't be like, well, he's not the kind of creature there's any reason not to kill. But I do think it's actually kind of a tricky question to spell out. What the mental life of such a person is like and like why, what the prohibition is, what the ground of the prohibition on killing a person like that is. But yeah, I love that question. I actually have been thinking a lot about that in my personal life.
Yeah, I think I was reading a paper recently where Dan Dennett discusses people having different experiences when exposed to the same stimuli. So, like for instance, if you like Brussels sprouts and I don't, or vice versa, we're experiencing the same thing, but you might be having a really good experience. Or sorry, we're having the same stimuli, but you might be having a really good experience, and I might be having a really bad one.
Yeah, right. No, I'm right. That's definitely the case, and Brussels sprouts provide an excellent example of that.
And then, so I guess like a follow up would be, and you might just take this as like a reductio of panpsychism, but if we like agree to that, then if we accept something like panpsychism, would we need to have an issue with something like smashing rocks, or would we need to not have an issue with like cutting sentient beings in half because you just end up with two things that are conscious?
Yeah, super. Okay, so I'm getting the impression that this is like a very philosophically sophisticated server. I was not expecting to get here and take questions about moderate deontology and thresholds and panpsychism. One reason I think the question that you're raising is so interesting and important is I do think plants are the kinds of things for which things can go well or badly. Like anyone who's tended to plants knows that your plants can flourish. Not in like some sort of Aristotelian sense, but like they can, well, maybe Aristotle, but they could, but your plants can do well or badly. And so I guess it's never seemed compelling to me that death is, like there's anything at all wrong with uprooting dandelions so that you can eat their greens. That said, it's clearly not good for the dandelion. And so why not think dandelions are the kinds of things, just like I think chickens and pigs and cats are, that there's a powerful prohibition against killing just because you want to eat them. And then you're raising this other view, which is what's called, for people who don't know, the view that Wesley has talked about, panpsychism, is the view that everything has at least some form of consciousness. So not just chickens and pigs and us, but also rocks, even atoms and molecules on this view would have some form of consciousness. And yeah, if it's just bare consciousness, it's unclear to me what my view about it should be, especially since I think many panpsychic views, Isaiah, like the form of consciousness that atoms have and that maybe pebbles have is so rudimentary that it's like it's barely of a piece with what you and I have. But yeah, that is I think a really hard question, and I do fervently hope for moral reasons that panpsychism is false.
Yeah. I agree. Well, I appreciate the answer.
Thanks for the question.
All right. Next, I think we're gonna have Haz come up here.
Hey Tyler, how's it going?
Hey, Has Vegan.
Appreciate you coming on here. Yeah, I think we do have a pretty philosophically minded server, but so I hope it's okay if I kind of continue along that thread.
Yeah, great.
Okay, cool. So I just want to start by saying, like, the way that I conceptualize veganism is that
Yes,
it's basically a deontological extension of rights from humans to non-humans.
Yeah.
To the extent that non-human animals would be interested in such rights, and chief among those I would consider to be the negative rights, just like, for example, the right not to be stabbed, for example.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a powerful vegan argument. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. First thing I wanted to ask was, like, what would you say constitutes a wild animal? Like, what makes an animal a wild animal?
I wasn't expecting that one. So yeah, when I think about the animals in my life, they're Zeke and Midnight, my two cats, and there's Kenya the rabbit. Kenya, their names all came from the Humane Society. We got them. Kenya is the least wild. Kenya rarely leaves the upstairs of our house. Does occasionally go outside, but we're always right there with him. Midnight and Zeke are a little more wild in that they go out of the house, and they actually clearly have a kind of rich life outside of our house. And then there are animals like chickadees who live around us, and they're clearly getting some benefit from us. Like they'll eat things that fall off of our table, or they might nest in parts of our home. And then there's another class of animal that's even more wild, which has nothing at all to do with our family. Like no truck with us whatsoever, and maybe those are like worms that are like deep in our backyard, or water bugs that are on the surface of the creek that runs through our backyard. And so my guess is there's just a continuum here where, like, I'm the most domesticated animal. Like Kenya and I are I'm even more domesticated than Kenya, obviously. Like I'm the most domesticated, least wild creature in the house. And then there's there are water bugs and emperor penguins. They're clearly on the other end of the spectrum. And then you have a bunch of animals in the middle, and where you want to draw the wild line is probably going to be vague and maybe a little arbitrary. But the chickadees are definitely, I would want to say, wild, even though they're using human stuff. Midnight the cat, I think, is definitely not wild. He really depends on us in a way. But those are the sorts of considerations I would think of, but I don't have an answer.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like you believe that, like, wildness can vary both inter and intra-species, kind of like invariably and universally, like across the animal kingdom. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, so what you're thinking is something like, just like you could have a wild chickadee, you could also have a not wild chickadee. Like, for all I know, you have a chickadee who lives in your house, and that chickadee is your companion. And then there are other species that maybe all the members of the species are not wild, like humans are probably a good example of that. And then other animals like mosquitoes, all mosquitoes are wild, I would guess. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So basically, it would follow then that, according to your view, some humans are wild, correct? Like wild animals, basically.
I guess I was thinking that no humans were wild, but you could convince me I'm wrong about that.
I mean, I'm not necessarily interested in doing that. Somebody could maybe pull the name the trait thing, but I'd like to kind of move on to something else. I remember you were talking about like the predator, killing of predators kind of thing. I was just wondering how you would see like beings like, let's say, chickens, for example, in that thing, because I see a lot of people focusing on lions, for example, just like obliterating lions, right? It's almost like a meme at this point. But like, what about like, you know, all the victims that chickens kill? Like, I'm just saying, like, you know, at some point, I can see you know, it going either way, right? Like, especially if you can see how these animals are procreating, the sentience hierarchy of the quote unquote perpetrators who are being, you know, proposed as, you know, murder victims basically by quote unquote vegans who are proposing like this kind of violence, this kind of like preemptive war kind of a thing. Like, I'm just wondering, I guess, what you would think about in terms of this chicken example, like killing chickens to save bugs.
Yeah, super. I think one thing this brings up is the predator issue is like significantly, it's fraught enough if you just focus on lions and wolves, and what you're bringing up which is I think really important and totally right, is it extends to trillions, if not more, animals.
I mean, we would literally imagine history books just saying, "Yeah, we yeeted the sharks first, then the you know, and then down the line until like nobody's left, and we're just like, what did we do?"
Right, even the brook trout were gone, right? Because they're busy eating the littler fish. So the view, I think, these people who, I think, even in the ideal, want to exterminate or think it's okay to exterminate carnivores must be thinking just of like certain sorts of carnivores, and maybe they would want to draw a line between I don't know. I mean,
I see no reason to. I guess like I see no reason to think that a lion has to actually require death any more than a chicken does, because there are solutions that, you know, especially with how quickly technology moves, we could easily have like lab engineered flesh that's cheap and, you know, easy to produce that could be fed to them, that could satisfy all their nutritional needs.
I would love it. I'm not sure the lions would love it, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, kind of along that vein, I wanted to ask you kind of like, so I know you had kind of talked about this, like what I kind of perceived as this like anti-sentientism about like if the world would be better, I guess, without sentient life, but still with life. If you recall that, is that kind of ringing a bell?
Yeah, I mean, that was the
topic. Yeah,
was talking elfism.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if you were to kind of contrast that with like a future in which like pleasure is just maximized, not in like any kind of rights violation type of way, but just like you know, like a vegan utopia where like vertical farming is the norm, no animals are being harmed in the making of these things, like power is all off like solar, wind, you know, natural resources like hydrogen powered cars, etc. Just like picture this just very, very efficient society where everything's peaceful, like all the weapons all around the world have just been completely, you know, dismantled or whatever, and there's peace everywhere. Would you see that as like a preferable situation, knowing that like there will come some point, like assume also in this world like it's just very, very highly populated, like there's skyscrapers spanning the entire world and like they're all just like up to the sky basically.
Yeah, I love the optimism that's encoded in this question. So is your question, would I prefer a world like that to a world that just had redwood trees in it or other like non-sentient? Yeah. But I think there are very powerful reasons in favor of preferring that world. Namely, think about how much happiness and well-being there is in the skyscraper world, and you're building into it that all the stuff that makes human life really difficult is just gone. So yeah, if that I can see like a very powerful case for that kind of world over my pure redwood world for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I appreciate that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the symbolism thing, about like the symbolism behind, like, let's say eating animal flesh versus eating animal products. How would the wearing of, like, let's say faux leather kind of factor in?
Yeah. I wonder about that one a lot. And this carries over to, I think some people think, to eating various forms of fake meat. I mean, especially with these companies that actually are trying to make it so we have something like that's like blood. Oh my gosh. Right. My guess is the symbolism of wearing fake leather is a little bit dodgy, where at least the message, let me put it slightly differently. Many people will not know that the fake leather you're wearing is not leather. And they will receive a message from you, which is something like, woo, wearing animals, or woo, dead cows. And
so I guess the point is, like, you kind of got to make it known that you're wearing a non-real one if you're going to do that.
Keep a post-it on it or something. Yeah, I think the issue, and this issue does carry over to fake meat too, and I think that is something people worry about with like Impossible Whoppers.
Yeah, sure. And I kind of, if I could just kind of keep it brief, because Pocket's trying to get me off here, but I just wanted to, they're trying to kick me off the stage here. But
it's not like that.
Well, yeah, I just wrote out some questions. I guess the main one, the really juicy one that I really wanted to get to was when you had said that, like, you do have some non-vegan food lying around, like your living space. I'm just wondering, like, if your roommates ate like chocolate bars, let's say, that like had dog milk in them, like, would you feel any differently about eating the doggo chocolate bar as compared to like the cow milk chocolate bar?
Oh, I mean, so I would certainly, I would feel differently about it. And like my attachments to certain animals generate a lot of my feelings. But yeah, I think the ethics of the two have got to be on a par.
Yeah, in terms of feeling, I meant more just in terms of how you view like the rights violations of the bodily autonomy, without medical reason, like that kind of thing.
Oh no, look, as I mean, my guess is my non-vegan, occasional like non-vegan forays are morally wrong. I mean, that it wasn't part of my position that I was defending my conduct. My view is that it probably is the case that I shouldn't be doing these things that I occasionally do. That's true of a lot of my conduct, I think.
All right, I respect that. All right, yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
To be clear, I wasn't like trying to force him off for any reason. There's some other people with questions. So anyways, Chase, are you here?
Yeah, what's happening?
All right, what do you got for us? Or for Tyler?
Cool, thanks for being here, Tyler. We appreciate your input. So I was curious about your thoughts of system change versus individual change. So my activism incorporates both. I am vegan, and I try to encourage other people to go vegan for the animal rights reasons, and to become anti-speciesist and to live that out in their lives, but also to become activists, to talk to their friends and family, join collective demonstrations, help change the laws, things like that. I've been arrested for animals. I've gone inside slaughterhouses and helped rescue the animals. So on and so forth, helped lobby politicians to ban fur in California. I like looking at like the civil rights movement as an example. So like it seems to me that social justice starts with taking personal responsibility and then educating one another and inspiring people to take action. And so this can be in the form of like a consumer boycott, such as the Montgomery Bus Boycott. inspired by the solo protest by Rosa Parks during the Civil Rights Movement in 1956, which deprived the government in Alabama of hundreds of thousands of dollars that it had been making from selling bus tickets, which is the equivalent of millions of dollars today. So 40,000 activists and everyday people chose to carpool, walk, or ride a bike, and this forced the city transit system into serious economic distress. And this activism gained international media coverage, and after just 381 days of boycotting, the Supreme Court ruled that the racial segregation in Alabama's buses was unconstitutional. So I just think that collective consumer boycotts can work in connection with mass protests and political lobbying to create widespread social change and new laws.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Chase, goodness. I hope I did not give the impression that I deny that. I think that's definitely it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because there is a bit of a debate in the animal rights movement about, like some activists will only do individual change, like promoting veganism, and say that's the only thing we should do. Some other activists will say, no, we only need to focus on systemic change. And then there's some people like me who are in the middle who are saying we should do both, or at least have some groups doing individual change, some other groups doing system change. But it all works towards the same goal, because it seems kind of unrealistic to me to think that we can make systemic change without enough individual change taking place first, or at least at the same time. Because, like, why would meat eaters want to ban slaughterhouses? Usually, the people who want to shut down the slaughterhouses are vegans. So, if we create more vegans, then we have more vegans who we can empower to become activists, and then we have more leverage to change the whole society.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. So, right, yeah, that all sounds great to me. I think the thing that maybe I had said earlier that you're picking up on, I do think there's too much concern in the philosophical circles I travel with like what people eat, and not enough concern with what they're doing about the production of food. That was the thing that I was trying to stress, and so I'm not denying that. Like the model that you're sketching seems like a very effective, maybe like the most effective model. In fact, it might be super hard to try to affect systemic change without affecting personal change. Like if Pake were just like lying around the house eating Whoppers all the time, it might be very hard for Pake to institute or to work for systemic change. Yeah, no, I'm on board with all that.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because it just seems like if we're trying to dismantle speciesism, but we're engaging in blatant speciesism, it seems like people might not take us seriously, and we're contributing to the problem we're fighting against. So, but then the other thing I was going to say was, have you heard of the Liberation Pledge? That's where we will not only be vegan, but we will not eat animal, or we will not eat at a table where animal products are being eaten. Because, like, if I was hanging out with non-vegan friends and I started eating a dog at the table, those non-vegans would not sit at that table with me. They would say, "What are you eating a dog for? This is crazy. That's animal cruelty. I'm not going to enable you to think that this is okay. I'm going to stand up against this and leave this table," And so I'm just extending that same logic to all animals and all animal products. And so what I find, and a lot of vegans find this when they engage in the Liberation Pledge, is that so long as you do it in a respectful way, a lot of times the non-vegans are actually really receptive of this. If you say, look, I love you, my friend, and I want to hang out with you, but I'm not comfortable sitting at a table where animals are being harmed. So if you want to share a meal with me, it needs to be a vegan meal. But if you're not comfortable doing that, then we can just hang out another time where animals aren't being eaten. And a lot of times people find they're really like, they respect that a lot. They respect your conviction, and it helps them realize the severity of the situation and the victims that are being brutalized. And they will eat a vegan meal with you because they do want to spend time with you, and they're open to trying new food. And this is kind of a way to force them to eat vegan food for a minute to see how good it tastes, but also just to know how serious the issue is, And if they're not willing to, like I said, you can still hang out with them another time. You don't have to ruin your relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Great. I mean, I guess we're getting to the end here. It's okay if I break down a little bit. I mean, for me, Chase, almost every single person in my life who I love is someone who eats animals occasionally, and I really struggle with the fact that I think those people are doing something that's monstrous. But the thing for me, Chase, is I also think that all of us are doing monstrous stuff all the time. When you look back historically, people like who were thought of as moral exemplars 150 years ago probably seem to you and me like total nightmares, morally, even if they had some good bits. And so one thing I've really struggled with that your liberation pledge is making me think about is how I should deal with people who are acting in ways that I think are not just morally wrong, but in some ways like morally quite repellent, but also how I should deal with the fact that I myself am presumably engaged in lots of behaviors that if there are people in 100 years, those people will be looking back on me with a sort of moral horror. I'm thrilled. I'm really glad to hear that the Liberation Pledge seems like it works for you, and that's something I've thought about in my own personal life. I mean, I would have to stop eating with, like I said, every single person I love, unless they were willing to eat vegan, which they probably would be. I mean, my wife and my children, I think, would do it. Other people not. Thank you for bringing that up. I did not know about that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you listening. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chase. So I think we're going to take on Dantis just one more time. Then we will close up because I have to go to work.
All right.
Right. Last question. So, I saw your video, and it's, basically presenting, sort of like this, like case of marginal cases or NTT, correct? Like this idea of it.
Yeah, I think I didn't have like the vocab for that, but if I remember correctly, yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
I actually, Dantes, I've never seen the video because I have a horror of my own voice. But I made the video, so yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
So
often, because often when we will, have a conversation with someone or with other vegans, including, and we'll be, we're gonna ask these questions, and at some point they're saying, they're making this like distinctive, like this moral distinction. So yeah, okay, this is okay, but this is not. So if we do it to humans, it's not okay, but if we do it to animals, it is okay. And then we're like, okay, but why? Like, what is it about this group, or what's like if you imagine it as a circle, like what is it about the properties of the circle, that makes it okay? Like, what virtue is it okay? And sometimes and sometimes it will respond or something, and then from time to time you'll get someone that says, "Oh no, but I'm a particularist." So I was wondering if you have what your thoughts are, how you would respond.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So for the people who are not as hardcore philosophical as so many people in this group clearly are, the view Dobbs is describing is it's a very common thing when you're talking to people about the ethics of killing animals to point out that it would be wrong to kill human beings who had various features, and because they have various features, and then point out that lots of animals that we kill have the same features. And so it seems to follow that it's wrong to kill the animals. And in response to that, someone might deny the generalization that it's wrong to kill creatures with such and such features. And they might instead insist that they're what's called a moral particularist. So they think there are no true general principles. They might agree that it's wrong to kill Dantes for food that you don't need, but that's not because it's in general wrong to kill sentient creatures who have full lives ahead of them, etc., whatever general features of Dantes we want to point to that make it wrong to kill Dantes. Yeah. I mean, one thing you might say when someone's trying to push back like that against you is, why do they think it's wrong to kill me and Pake and Wysea and Height and you? I mean, or are they like, well, they're agnostic about this, since after all, they're particularists. And if they're like, oh no, there's a general rule against humans, then you can be like, well, it sounds like you aren't really a particularist. You're just like someone who's arguing in bad faith and pretending you are. And if they're like, oh no, like, here's a case-by-case basis. I mean, again, I think that's just bad faith. Like, they don't seriously think it maybe is okay to kill Pake for fun, or like just because they're hungry. And if they are, then like, I wouldn't talk to them. I think that sounds dangerous, Dantas.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. No. I don't know if Bach wants to say something, or if you would like to, have a sort of like a closing statement or something you want to say.
Yeah.
But
I guess I would just say I'm happy to. So I just made this Discord account because Bach asked me to do this. I'm going to probably like disable it. But if people after the session, but if people have questions for me, I do like chatting with people, and I'm a pretty good emailer. And yeah, you can just look me up on the University of Vermont Philosophy website. And my email address is my first name dot my last name, tyler.doggett@uvm.edu. And yeah, feel free to get in touch. Thank you all so much for being here. I've really appreciated getting to talk with you. And thank you for inviting me to do this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, it's great having you here, and maybe perhaps somewhere in the future, and also, I mean, you might not be familiar with Discord, but it is a really great place to have conversations both in voice and text. It's sort of like really, it's a perfect place that facilitates conversation. So you might even but yeah, no, I am really thankful for you being here, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Dantas. Yeah, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it.